Hi guys, welcome back to Sunflower Cottage Crochet. I'm Sarah and today I'm going to teach you how to make this mod scarf. We call it the Paige Convertible Mod Scarf. Now it's convertible because it can be so many things, and it's mod because it's modified to be different. So as you can see, it has a wide middle that tapers down to small ends. This end has a tassel, and this end has a pom-pom. You can also leave the ends plain if you like. The reason I have one of each is because in this tutorial I show you how to do both. I also show you how to just tie in your ends so that you can just leave it clean if you want to. So to explain a little further, a mod scarf, a convertible mod scarf, can be many things. For example, let me move Gladys back here a little bit. So as of right now, it's a little shawlette. Do you see? And in the back, it actually reaches pretty far around her back, far down, and up on her neck. It can be a cowl if you fold the widest part over. Here we go. Oh. Sorry for the clock in the background. It wraps a lot, okay guys? It really is convertible. It can also be, excuse me Gladys, it can also be a hooded wrap for the extra cold days. You can see it reaches down pretty far. And even on a big girl like me, this works really good as a shawlette. Just a quick little one to just add that little bit of extra warmth. It can also just be a scarf. It can be a super scarf, or you can wrap it, the pom-pom, there we go, like this, and there's still tons of coverage and length to spare. This thing is amazing. I actually made one for my daughter using a smaller cake and just did fewer rows, and it's fabulous. So today I'm going to show you how to make this lovely mod scarf. And first I want to go over a couple of things. One is, if I can get my notes here, the yarn that I used for this was yarn B. You'll get to see it in the next section of the video, but it is a cake yarn in a 4-weight. This pattern is written so that you can use both a 4-weight or a lightweight 3 DK yarn. I go over the hook sizes that you will be needing, but just to help you get started, for the lighter weight yarn, you're going to need a 4mm hook. For the heavier weight yarn, you're going to need a 5.5mm hook. So with that in mind, grab what you have and work with that. For the worsted weight, I needed around 400, maybe a little less yardage. So you might need like 1 1/4 of a cake, or if you just have 400-ish yards of worsted weight that you like laying around, grab it and use it. It doesn't have to be stripy. This is kind of color blocky because of the nature of cake self-striping yarns. I forget the colorway on this. I state it later in the video, so you'll know what it is later. I have used Bernat Pop. That's what I used to make my daughter's. I had enough left over to make her a hat that matched. I've used Caron Cakes. Helen actually used Caron Cakes and Mandala yarn, which was my very first one, and I love the way it looks with the thinner yarn. So for the tutorial, I wanted to try it with the thicker yarn to see how it came out, and it came out just as amazing as the 3-weight yarn. So grab your yarn, grab your hooks, and join me, and we're going to make this together. And I will show you at the end how to make a pom-pom and the tassel as well as just weaving in the ends the way I like to do it and leaving it clean. So without further ado, let's get hooking. Okay, we are at my workstation and now I'm going to get you started on this pattern. I'm using worsted weight and an I 5.5mm hook to get myself started. So for both sizes, this pattern is worked exactly the same. The only difference is the number of rows you need. So for the lightweight yarn or the DK yarn, you will need more rows to get it big enough, wide enough before you start decreasing. And for the worsted weight, you will obviously need less because it is a thicker yarn. So I'm going to start out with a slip knot on my hook. However you do that is great. We have tutorials that I've linked in the description box below on how to do all these basic things, but I'm going to assume for the purposes of this video to keep it shorter that you already know. So again, it's worked the same for both types of yarn. So we're going to chain 3 and double crochet in the third chain from the hook, which is the one next to the slip knot. And now we have 2 stitches because the chain 2 counts. We're going to chain 2 and turn, and we're going to increase by placing another stitch into this first one. So now we have 2 stitches, and I'm going to put another 2 double crochets in the last stitch. So we went from 2 to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and now I'm going to chain 2 again and turn, and this starts the repeat of the pattern with this increase row. You do an increase, and then you do an X stitch row, and then you do a bean stitch row. Please, I encourage you to re-watch the videos on the X and bean stitches if you are not completely confident in doing those yet, because I am not going to go into complete detail here. I'm just going to show you how to work this specific pattern. So I'm going to work my X stitch by skipping and working a double crochet, and then I'm going to work a double crochet and skip stitch behind the first one, and then I'm going to place a double crochet in the last stitch. Okay, and we still only have 4 stitches, so we're going to chain 2 and turn, and I'm going to skip this stitch and start my bean stitch in the next. So you yarn over and insert and pull up a loop 3 times, and you'll have 7 loops on your hook. Pull through all and chain 1, skip that next stitch because we have effectively worked 2 here, and we're going to put a double crochet in the last stitch. So we still only have 4. We have our chain up and our final, and we have this one here which is on top of the bean stitch, and the chain one that I'll also refer to as the eye. So now we're going to work another increase row. So we're going to chain 2 and turn, and I do not like to put increases in the very beginning stitches from here on out, just because I prefer my edging to be very uniform. So we're going to increase in the next stitch, which is that chain or eye in your bean. So we're going to put 2 double crochets there and 2 double crochets on top of the bean in the next stitch, and then we're going to put 1 double crochet in the final stitch, and now we have 6. Okay, so from here on you could do a standing double crochet or an alternate double crochet if you prefer not to do the chain 2. The reason I chose chain 2 is because it was less likely to bend over and make a big gap. Now moving on, we're going to chain 2 and turn, or alt DC, whichever you prefer. Skip that first stitch because it's already been worked into, and we're going to work our X stitches across this row, like so, and again. So now we're going to have 2 complete X stitches in this row. A little more yarn, and then we're going to double crochet in the final stitch. Grab some more yarn here. And then we chain 2 and turn. And now we're going to work another bean stitch. So this is already taken by the chain 2 or the alt DC, whatever you're doing. We're going to work in the next stitch and make a bean stitch. Chain 1, skip 1, work in the next stitch, another bean. Chain 1, skip 1, and put a double crochet in the final stitch. And now we have 2 X's and 2 beans, and then our starting in our end stitches. So we're going to chain 2 and turn, and now we're going to increase again. And again, we skip the first one, and then we go and put 2 double crochet in the next stitch. Need yet more yarn. And then we're going to double crochet across until there are only 2 stitches left. So place 1 in the next and 1 in the next. And now we have our chain up and our chain stitch after our bean. So I'm going to put 2 double crochet in this second to last, and then I'm going to double crochet on the last stitch. So now we have 8. And that is how you're going to increase every increase row. Start out with your chain or standing or Alt VC, and then put 2 double crochet in the next stitch, and then stitch along until you have 2 stitches left. Increase by placing 2 double crochets in the second to last stitch, and then putting a double crochet in the final stitch. Chain 2 and turn, and now we're going to work our X stitch row again. And this is the pattern you're going to repeat until you reach the desired width and length. So for worsted weight yarn, my goodness, I am struggling with this X stitch. I know you can do it. I believe in you. There we go. For worsted weight yarn, you will need 70 rows of this pattern to make the 14 inches wide that the scarf should be. For the lightweight, you will need 88 rows to reach that 14-inch wide mark. And when you have crocheted this pattern all the way up to that point, we will then start decreasing pretty much the same way that we increased. The only difference is we're working across 2 stitches to decrease instead of just placing 2 in 1. So you'll need to work across your rows until you have 3 stitches left, and decrease the next 2, and then put a double crochet in the last stitch. So, but for now, I'm going to work one more increase row with you, and then I will turn you loose to work the pattern. So chain 2 and turn, and in this next stitch we're going to place 2 double crochet, and then we're going to double crochet across, and I'm hoping that you can see how I am, or where I should say I am placing these stitches, because I know on the tops of the bean stitch it can be a little tricky, until we only have 2 stitches left. And then you're going to place 2 double crochet in the second to last stitch, and then 1 double crochet in the final stitch, and then begin your texture rows once again. So this is how it's going to start to look. It's very gradually building up, which is what we want. We don't want it to make such a sudden big increase that it just looks wonky. Again, for the worsted weight yarn, you need to work up to 70 rows, and then for the lightweight yarn, you need to work up to 88 rows, and I will come back and show you how we're going to decrease this pattern. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and I have worked this off camera. It only took about a couple hours to get this far, so this works up pretty quick. I've actually worked up to 69 rows, and I have reached my 14 inches. So instead of increasing on the 70th row, I am going to start decreasing because I don't want to get any bigger than the 14 inches. If you have not reached 14 inches yet, go ahead and increase this one last time, and then come back for row 71, which will be the restart of your texture rows, the X's and the beans. But if you are like me and you are ready to start decreasing, well, let's get to it. So we'll need to chain 2 and turn as per usual. And then you're going to skip the first stitch as we have been, and then decrease these two on either side of your bean stitch together. And I'm going to actually zoom in a little more so you can see better. Okay, these two stitches right here, the chain up and the actual bean stitch, you're going to decrease those two together. So double crochet decrease as you started and you don't finish, and then you go into the next one, you start it, and then you pull through all three. So you can see that these two were now made into just one stitch. And then you're going to double crochet all the way down until there are 3 stitches remaining, and then you're going to decrease the 2 stitches before the final stitch together, and then place a double crochet in the last stitch. I'm going to work this down to the end, and I will meet you at the end and show you how I decrease at that point also. I will meet you there. Okay, so I have made it to my final bean stitch, and I have 3 stitches left, the 2 that make up this bean and the 1 on the end. I'm going to decrease just like I did at the beginning around this bean stitch by inserting here and here. Again, we have videos for how to do this in much more in depth, and those are all linked below. And then I'm going to double crochet in the final stitch. Hopefully it makes it in the stitch, maybe. There we go. Okay, so now we have done our first decrease. So now we're just going to work our regular texture rows just as we have been. You're going to do your X's and then your beans, and I will meet you back here to do another decrease row. Okay, I have completed both of my texture rows, and now I'm going to show you one more time how to do the decrease. So we're going to chain 2 and turn, and skip that very first stitch and work a decrease around this bean stitch. We're going to use the chain and the top of the bean to do it. So start your double crochet, go into the next and start another, and then yarn through all 3 loops, and then work yourself all the way down the row in double crochets until you have only 3 stitches left, and I will meet you back once again at the end of this row. Okay, I'm back, and I just worked my last one before the final 3 stitches, the chain up, the chain stitch after the bean, and the bean stitch itself. I'm going to work my decrease around this bean, okay, and then I'm going to place a double crochet in the final stitch. So remember earlier I told you how doing the increases and decreases in the next stitches helps keep the edges straight. Well, here you can see all throughout this that this has kept this pretty darn straight instead of having weird fan outs. Now you can also start to see how this is going to start curving, if I can get it in the camera here, start curving in, and that's what we want. It's going to start decreasing down to this very last point, and at that point we're going to talk about whether or not you want to put tassels, a pom-pom, or nothing on the ends of this. I did tassels, Helen did poms, but again you can also do just nothing. So keep working this repeat. So instead of increasing, we're now decreasing. So decreasing in the 2nd and 3rd stitches, and the 3rd and 2nd from the last on each end will get you back to the very last. And when we reach that very last few rows, I will work those with you together so it looks right. And then again we will go over how to do some pom-poms, some tassels, or just weave in ends and call it good. Meet you back here when I have made it to that point. Okay, I have worked my scarf all the way down to nearly the end, and I, as promised, will show you how to work these last few rows to get it to match the starting end, which, sorry, I had to toss over here because this thing is pretty big. So if you recall, we started with 2, then we grew to 4, and then we did a 1 X stitch and 1 bean, and then we increased to 4, and then we were able to do 2 X stitches and 2 beans. Well, this is actually going to end with beans instead of X's because we're just continuing the pattern on. So I have my 2 X's and 2 beans, and now I'm going to decrease. So I'm just showing you the very end of this pattern so there's no confusion. Okay, so I decreased, and now I need to decrease again because that's all I have left, plus the final DC on the end. Okay, and that will put me down to 4 double crochet stitches once I have decreased that. So, and we're counting along the top, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to chain 2 and turn, and we will work X stitches. It'll be just 1 because we work it over these next 2. So it matches the beginning where we're down to just 1 X stitch and 1 bean stitch. And then we place a double in the final stitch. And now we still have our 4, so we're going to chain 2 and turn again. And in this very next stitch, I'm going to work a bean, chain 1, skip this next one, and put a double crochet in the final stitch. And I still technically have 4 stitches. I have my chain up, the bean stitch, the chain up, sorry, and my final double. So now I'm going to chain 2 and turn, and now I'm going to decrease the 2 stitches surrounding my bean. So here and here, and then I'm going to place a double in the final. And if you recall, the pattern itself, I started out with 2 double crochet rows to get it built up enough to work my texture rows. So we're going to finish off with chaining up and turning, and I'm going to decrease the next 2 stitches together to make my starting of 2 double crochet, just like when we began the project. So now I technically have 2 stitches, and I had already cut my yarn, so I'm going to chain 1, pull through to finish off, and that should match pretty close. It's pretty close because this technically is fatter because of the decrease. You could, if you really wanted to, just decrease those last 2 into 1 and make it quite pointy, but I'm going to leave it for the sake of numbers, just that. But again, it'll be up to you. So now we're going to need to weave in these tails. We could, however, leave them for attaching things, but I'm going to go ahead and weave them in to show you how I like to do that. And then I will also show you how to make a tassel and a pom-pom, and you can choose how you want to leave this pattern, whether it's clean with a tassel or with a pom-pom. So pause the video, finish up, and I will meet you back here when we're ready to add those things. Okay, I am back, and I have my needle, the slightly larger eye. There are some that have quite a bit larger eyes. I'm going to thread this through, and I like to go back and forth a few times to try and lock it in. I'm gonna go through this stitch to do it because I don't have a row of stitches so much to work in. I could choose to go this way now, which I probably should. Okay, now don't pull it so tight that it curls up your work. pick a different stitch to start your next pass through. Go through those stitches, and now pick another different stitch to go back through, and that's my 3. And if I had a pair of scissors, I would be very happy right now. Just a moment. Found my scissors. I'm just going to trim this tail off, throw my yarn away, and there is the finished end. It looks fine, clean, as well as with something on it. Just a note, it's going to take close to 400 yards of worsted to make this entire thing. So just look at how much yardage you have on your yarn cake or whatever yarn you're using, and grab about 400 yards worth just to make sure you have more than enough. Okay, so again, I'm just going to weave up this stitch to this next row, and remember, don't pull it so tight that you lose the shape of your tip. And now I'm just going to work across these stitches for 3 passes. So there's 1. I'll pick a different stitch to go into and run it through. There's my second pass, and again I'm going to pick a different stitch, run it through for the final pass. And I'll make sure that this is not misshapen. Trim it off. There we go. Toss the yarn end. So here we are with both ends cleaned up. Okay, now in order to move along with the pom-pom, you have a choice. You can either use one of these or a piece of cardboard. Now I'm going to show you how to use these. These are clover pom-pom makers. I actually got them at a garage sale. Essentially, it was a yarn, somebody who was selling yarn on Facebook, and this came with it. So in my view, it's a bit like a garage sale. They're not really too horribly expensive at the store or on Amazon. If I can find a link, I will put that below. But in any case, I'm thinking this really big one is great for hats, but I'm kind of thinking the little one for the small little ends that we have here. So to get started, these are kind of tricky. You have to open it up like so. And these do come apart. In fact, you're probably going to need to do that anyway. But yeah, and you actually need them to be opposite sides, like so. Okay? So make sure you grab enough yarn, whichever color you want for the ends, and I will meet you back here with my yarn. Alright, I'm back with the clover pom-pom makers. This is for a quite large pom-pom. If you like really big fluffy ones on top of hats or in the corners of blankets or whatever, that would be this one here. This is the medium size, and it's great for the top of a hat as well as for the ends of our scarf. There is a much smaller one as well that would probably look just as cute at the end of our scarf, but sorry, I need to adjust the camera for you. But I don't have it, so I'm going to use this medium one. Now, I got these when I bought somebody's lot of yarn on Facebook Marketplace, but I did find them at Joann's, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, and Amazon, and you can get, usually they come in the set of these two, the large and the medium. Sometimes you can get the set of 3, and it's really not too horribly expensive. I mean, I think it's like $12 for the set that I have here with the large and the medium. So if I can find a link to put down below for that, I will. So here's how we're going to use this. I want to show you the anatomy of these things first. So it looks a little crazy, I know, but how you use it is, you see these little flaps here. We're going to push those open. There are two, but we need them together. And then there's some again on the opposite side, and we're going to push those open. So now your contraption looks a bit like this. Okay, these little rainbows shaped areas are what we're going to wrap the yarn around. If you have chosen to do the pom-pom, make sure you have tons of yarn. The fuller you wrap this, or the more you wrap it, the thicker and fluffier your pom-pom will be. And that, if that's what you're going for, then, you know, and you should. That's what we need. So I have a nearly full cake here of the same yarn to work with to make my pom-poms. And you'll need to make two, so you'll have to do this method twice in order to have the two pom-poms you need, one for each end. Also, one more thing to note, because it'll be kind of hard to see after we've wrapped everything. After we have secured the pom-pom, and we'll get to that point, you're going to have to pull this thing apart to release it entirely. And in order to do that, you'll need to grab here and pull apart. Now, it won't be that easy when it's wrapped full of yarn. It'll be a little bit of a pull, but in the end, completely worth it. You can also cheat and go buy a faux fur pom-pom and just put it on, but those usually are a little too large for my taste for the end of something like this. So I'm going to show you how to use this today. So we're going to take this thing like so, and some people say try to wrap it in here, but then you have to start going like this, which, you know, apparently works. You're still going to have to hold that down a little, but you want to start on the end. Try not to hook it around these. If you do that, then you're going to have to fix it, okay? So just wrapping it like so, over and over, and trap that little bit of yarn. And you want to keep wrapping. There we go. Don't worry, we're going to go back over this. You want to keep wrapping till you get to the other end. And making sure it didn't hook on these corners, because it loves to do that. Now we're going to go back the other direction, and this time you don't have to be quite so precise, and you can get faster and faster as you get more and more comfortable with it. And we're going to keep wrapping till we get to this other end, making sure we don't hook it again, and we're going to go back and forth until this arch here, this inner arch, is almost gone. Again, the more you wrap it, the fuller it gets, the better it will look, and it will look even better if you have yarn that changes color pretty often. And remember not to hook it on these little corners, otherwise you'll have to go back to the point that it wrapped on that corner and then fix it. So I'm going to keep wrapping until I have it really full. This will take quite a bit of yarn, but it is also a good way to use up some scrap yarns too. If you think about it, you could join them all and then just make a bajillion pom-poms out of all of your scrap yarns. So I'm just going to keep wrapping. Whoop. That tells me it's starting to get a little full. The thicker your yarn, the easier it is to reach that really full point. I'm so happy it changed color on me, because I wanted something to look a little bit colorful. Okay, you can see that my arch is nearly gone. It didn't take long to fill this up. The thinner the yarn, obviously, the more you're going to need. The thicker the yarn, the less you're going to need. This is a worsted weight, so okay, I think that's more than enough. So now what we do to stop is we hold our tail end in place, and I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut just to the top here. Keep holding it in place, and we're going to fold this down in, and that's going to help hold it. So that's one done. Now we need to do the other side. You don't have to put this in the channel. A lot of times I will just hold it here. I should have gone from the other side so I could wrap the way I like to. And then it's just as easy to do it that way. You get started up pretty quick. So I'm just going to go around again. Okay, to the end. I'm going to bring this one up and trap it again. It won't be perfect, but to be honest, it'll be about the right length, won't it? And after you snip all this, you'll have to trim up maybe a couple of stragglers, which is pretty much those ends. Now remember, you don't want to hook it on the corner bits. And just keep wrapping and keep wrapping and keep wrapping and keep wrapping, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until that inner archway is nearly gone, or all gone, considering it's going to depend on how full you want your pom-pom. If you don't want it too fluffy and thick for the end of your project, then stop where you think it should be. It's really based upon the person who's winding it up. Whoop. There we go. And you can stop anywhere. You don't have to stop at on either end or in the middle or whatever, just wherever it looks good to you. And remember, it's handmade, so it's not going to be exact match. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to go a few more passes, especially down here where it looks a little thin, and I'm going to call that good. And again, I'm going to trim right at the top, and still holding that in, I'm going to push this down in place. So here it is, completely wrapped. As you can see, you're going to need extremely sharp scissors. These are Fiskars. They are definitely sharp, but we'll find out just how sharp because we're going to have to cut through all of this. Now you see that there are little channels here, this little gap here. That's what we're going to cut into. And this is quite firm, but as you cut, it's going to loosen up, so hold it good. And we're going to insert our scissors right into this channel, and you'll feel that channel with your bottom part of your scissors here. And that is where you're going to start to cut. All along that channel. And you're going through so much yarn, this is why you need extremely sharp scissors. And you saw that pop up. That's why it's important to hold it tighter than I apparently was holding it. Whew. All right. Not going to worry about that one yet. Okay, so that's one channel cut. Now we got to do the other side. And again, hold it good. And we're going to insert right into that channel again. I'm going to cut along. The little scissors struggle just a touch, but Fiskars are good and sharp, so I know it will do it. Ah, it's satisfying. Okay, so you can see how it's going to look. It's going to be fairly fluffy. So I'm going to set this down for a moment, and I need to cut more yarn. I'm going to grab about 20 inches or so, snip it off, and then we're going to put it in this channel and flip it over and bring it up through that same channel using the middle of your cut piece. All right. And now I am going to do a surgeon's knot. So you pull through once. You don't have to do, you could do like a regular knot. And I'm going to wrap it a second time. And then we're going to pull. It's going to go down into that channel. Pull to the point where you can feel like, okay, this yarn might break if I pull any tighter. And then I'm going to do that surgeon's knot once more. So I'm wrapping it twice, and then I'm going to pull down tight. Now, I'm not done. I'm going to put it back through these channels and flip it up and do the same thing on the other end. And again, I'm doing the surgeon's knot. There we go. And do once more. This will help make sure it is very secure. All right, so these are probably way more than you need to secure your pom-pom to your project, but that's what they are for. After you have secured this thing, then you use these to secure. So now to pop this open, we need to grab these little flappies, and it'll be a little more difficult, but there it is. And you can see there what nice clean pom that is. I'll grab the other end, pop that up as well, and again you'll see that you're going to have a couple, that was probably an end piece that you're going to have to trim. Remember what I told you earlier, you need to grab this and this, pull apart. That came apart easier than normal. And then you can kind of fluff or shake it out, and there it is. Now you'll, like I said, you'll have a couple that you need to sort of trim up and make a little more uniform. But to be honest, that was so much faster and easier than the traditional like cardboard and so on. I know some people use like forks and whatever, but I'm saying you don't need to. You can just get these little pom-pom makers. Okay, so when I'm done sort of fluffing this thing up, and I figure that it's not to my perfection liking, but it'll work for the purpose of this. I'm going to see about attaching this to one of my ends, and I'm going to go ahead and use this nearest end to me, and I'm going to pick one strand and attach my needle. There's about 100 ways you can do this, but this is just the way I'm doing it. Okay. I'm going to attach the other strand and just go through where I feel like it kind of could use it. Now, it's on there, but obviously it's not secure. So again, I know knots, but I'm going to do a surgeon's knot once more. Untwist it here. I'm going to trim this down to a workable length there. You won't even see that knot. Okay. I feel like the surgeon's knot is much more secure. And then you can trim these to match the length of your palms. And that's on. And you can continue to fluff and trim as needed later. But here it is with the pom on. For the other side, you'll need to do the exact same thing that we just did with the pom-pom maker. You just put it back together, making sure that these ends are going the same directions. Okay. All right, and then you'll make another one just how I showed you. So rewind and watch again how to make this pom, and you will have two beautiful poms for the end of your scarf. Stay tuned, and now I'm going to show you how to make the tassel, should you want that instead. For the tassel part of this video, we're going to continue to use the same yarn I have been using, and I'm going to cut several strands depending on how thick or thin you want it. That's going to be a personal preference. I'm just going to show you a quick version. So I'm gonna say probably, it depends on how long you want your tassel. If you want your tassel 6 inches, you need to cut a 12 incher. If you want 3 inches, cut a 6 incher. If you know, it's again, if you want 5 inch, you need to cut 10. So I'm just gonna pick a length that I figure I will double over, and I'm gonna snip. And then I'm gonna keep, it doesn't have to be exact because you can trim up later. I'm gonna keep trimming until I have as many as I figure I want. So keep going until you have the desired number, and I will meet you back here when we're ready to create the actual tassel. Okay, so I have as many as I am doing for this tutorial. Again, if you want it fuller, do a whole lot more. If you don't want it so full, do less. It's really dependent upon the person. So I have also cut a long length of yarn to work with when doing this. So I'm gonna find my center, and again, just guesstimate. It doesn't have to be completely perfect. And I'm gonna grab my ends and fold it over that. Now we're gonna grab this up like so. And here's our tassel. Again, you can trim the ends so that they all match. And I'm gonna go ahead and with this incredibly long bit of yarn, just tie a simple knot right here just to kind of hold it, just the one. Now, I'm gonna fold this over and I'm gonna move that out of the way so I don't include it in my wrapping. So I don't recommend wrapping it facing this way. You want to not have that split visible. So you're gonna need to wrap around a few times. And this is just how I do my tassels. If you know a better way, by all means, use that. Okay? Now I just do that to help hold it in place and create that little top. And you're probably gonna have to fiddle with it and fiddle with it for a while. So now, to secure it is entirely up to you. You can thread your needle and work up through this to help secure that. And then I'm going to come in somewhere else, preferably the back, and yep, I'm going to knot. And again, I'm going to do a surgeon style. And I can just leave this tail down as part of this, so you might want to do your knot down there, but I don't think it will matter all that much. And then with this one, we are going to secure it to the end of your scarf. So again, thread the needle and pick the spot, a little bit meatier spot there. Okay, and I'm gonna come up through the top of this thing as well as the scarf itself to help sort of grab it. And I'm gonna do it again, and this time I'm gonna go ahead and surgeon knot once more. Okay, now this one I'm gonna trim short because it doesn't flow in with that. And then I can take my scissors and I can find the point that seems about right at this short one here and just trim across. And you have a cute little tassel. Again, I would do that knot down here. I wasn't thinking about that. But there it is. Cute little tassel at the end of your scarf. So again, you can make it as thick or as thin as you like. It's really dependent on the person who's making it. So there is the finished scarf. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Here's the pom, here's the tassel, or you could just leave it blank. You just leave it clean. It's up to you. It's your scarf. I hope you liked it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.